It was 7:13 in the morning when the world stopped making sense. Two police cruisers idled in my driveway, their blue lights pulsing against the wet shine of dew, bouncing off the windows like. Look bored. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, wearing an old sweatshirt from the Army Corps of Engineers, the ceramics still warm against my palm. Behind them, 40 feet away, stood Harper Kensington, queen of the Brookstone Hills Homeowners Association, arms crossed, lips tight, sunglasses hiding whatever satisfaction simmered underneath. The smell of freshly cut grass floated. Worst things in my life: war zones, deserts, bureaucrats with clipboards. But there was something surreal about this. Being accused of trespassing on land I owned, standing on a driveway I'd poured with my own hands. "Morning, officers," I said, voice level. "I'm guessing this is about Ms. Kensington back there?" They didn't answer right away. The older one, Sergeant Pacheco, mid-40s. Squared shoulders, the kind of calm that comes from having seen too many stupid things, just nodded and said, "We got a call about a possible trespasser. Claim was the property belongs to the HOA." I took a slow sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me. "Then you've been lied to," I said. And for a few seconds, that's all there was. The wind rustling the oak branches, the sound of a bird. Not subject to her rules. I checked twice, 3 times. I had the survey, the deed, the title insurance, the receipts. But in Harper's world, power wasn't about truth. It was about control. 6 months before that morning, life had finally started to quiet down. I was 54, recently retired after 20 years with the Army Corps of Engineers. 2 kids, one in med school, one finishing college. A divorce behind me, peace ahead of me, or so I thought. I'd found this patch of land on the edge of Brookstone Hills, a small suburban development outside Tulsa, clean. 150-year-old oak tree in the front yard that creaked like an old ship when the wind picked up. The first time I saw it, I remember thinking, this tree has seen more life than half the people in this neighborhood. I wanted to build a workshop out back, maybe teach my son a bit of metalwork when he visited, maybe rebuild the old lathe that had followed me across 3 duty stations. I wasn't looking for trouble. I'd had enough of that overseas. I was just looking for a place to breathe. Before buying, I'd done my homework, called the county clerk, checked the plats, reviewed the HOA covenants. My property wasn't inside their boundary. 200 feet clear. I remember feeling proud of that small detail, like I'd outsmarted something big and bureaucratic without even trying. For a while, things were perfect. Then the letters started. The first envelope came 2 weeks after I moved in. It had that heavy, waxy texture that tries to look official. Inside, a printed letter on Brookstone Hills letterhead. It smelled faintly of toner and arrogance. Notice of violation, it read. Unapproved structure on property. The structure was my garage, built decades before her HOA existed. At the bottom, fine assessed, $2,500. I remember sitting at the kitchen counter, holding that letter, laughing under my breath. I emailed the address listed, attached my deed, survey, legal description, typed 3 simple words, "Not in your HOA." No response. 2 weeks later, Harper herself showed up. I heard her before I saw her, the sharp click of heels on gravel, the whisper of designer fabric. When I opened the door, she was standing there with a clipboard and a camera, wearing that fixed smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Good morning." Them divine. Of violations affecting the visual harmony of the community. "My property isn't part of your community," I said. She smiled like I'd just told her a child's joke. "We'll see about that." Then she started taking photos. My fence, my mailbox, my truck. Every click of her phone camera felt like a mosquito bite. "Ma'am," I said, voice low, "you're trespassing." She didn't even look up. "This is common property, sir. The board corrected the boundaries earlier this year." That was the first time I heard that phrase, corrected the boundaries. It sounded so bureaucratic. Retired machinist, brown skin weathered by decades in workshops, the kind of man who still believes in handshakes and common sense. He sat on my porch, squinting at the letter under the porch light. "She's bleeding you, brother." Me, the stubborn ex-military engineer, and Reuben, the old machinist with the dry sense of humor. 2 men who'd seen systems abuse people too many times to walk away quietly. I called Lucia Brennan. The next morning. She was a local attorney, early 40s, sharp as a scalpel and just as precise. Her voice on the phone was calm, confident. "Harper Kensington again," she said when I explained. "She's been pushing boundaries, literally. You're not the first person she's tried this with." Lucia agreed to take the case pro bono for now, out of gratitude and, I think, a bit of outrage. Type to back down when she was wrong. She was the type to double down until everyone else surrendered. A week later, another letter came. Not a fine this time, but a summons. The HOA was suing me for violating community covenants. I remember standing at the mailbox, reading the words in the cold morning air, and laughing out loud. "You've got to be kidding me," I said to no one. "Intimidate, harass, bankrupt." I looked down at the letter in my hands, then back up at the horizon. "Not this time," I said. "They picked the wrong guy." Lucia filed a counterclaim, fraud, harassment, abuse of process. Then she subpoenaed the HOA's financials. What came back didn't just smell bad, it reeked. Over $140,000 missing from their accounts. Vague entries labeled administrative services, community enhancement, consulting. All of them tracing back to one entity, Kensington Property Solutions, LLC, Harper's company. She'd been paying herself out of HOA funds while threatening to foreclose on families who owed a few $100s in dues. When they couldn't pay, she bought their homes through shell mail fraud. I remember reading the draft and thinking, good. Let's see how she likes being on the other end of the paperwork. When word spread, more neighbors came forward, the Kents. A young couple fined for a swing set. Mr. Delgado, a retired teacher nearly evicted over unauthorized shutters. The stories poured out like a dam breaking. We met in backyards, in garages. Anywhere we could talk without Harper's spies overhearing. Reuben joked that it felt like we were forming a resistance cell. Maybe we were. One night, under the dim glow of string lights in Reuben's yard, Lucia said, "You realize what she's doing isn't just harassment, right? This is racketeering. If we can prove intent, this could go federal." Someone laughed nervously. "You think she'll go to jail?" Lucia's eyes were cold. "If there's justice, yes. But justice moves slow. And Harper moved fast. She filed new fines, sent inspectors to photograph my property every week. One morning, I woke up to orange stickers plastered all over my mailbox and garage. Code violation. They left a gummy residue that took an hour to scrub off. Reuben caught one of her inspectors on camera. On the HOA's internal documents, we found something incredible. Harper had quietly taken out a $1.2 million loan back in 2019 to finish the neighborhood pool and clubhouse, and hadn't made payments. Workbench. My coffee had gone cold. The realization hit me slow, like a fuse burning toward dynamite. "If I buy the foreclosed property," I said out loud, "I'll own the land under their feet." When I called Lucia, she went silent for a long second. Then she said, "That's insane. And brilliant." "I'm doing it," I said. And that's when everything started moving faster. Harper must have caught wind of it, because 2 days before the auction, she showed up at my house again. No sunglasses this time, no armor. Just pale skin, trembling hands, eyes wide with fear. "Garrett," she said, voice cracking, "please, don't do this." "Do what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "You'll destroy me. My business. My reputation." I looked at her for a long moment. Limestone walls, reading out the property description in that slow, rhythmic cadence of legal ritual. Opening bid, $850,000. I raised my hand. $875. Silence. No one else spoke. Going once. Going twice. A voice rang out, "Harper's. This is illegal. He's not part of the HOA." The auctioneer didn't even look up. "Ma'am, this is a public. The kind of white that hides the sun." I drove to the courthouse with the deed for the common property in a manila folder on the passenger seat. The air inside the truck smelled of motor oil and nervous sweat. Every traffic light felt like it lasted a lifetime. By the time I parked, I'd gone through 3 cups of gas station coffee and one prayer that today would finally end the madness. Lucia was already there, her hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp and unreadable. "You ready?" she asked. I didn't answer. Readiness didn't matter anymore. I was past the point of nerves. I was running on momentum, the way you do in the last mile of a marathon. Inside the courtroom, the lights buzzed faintly. The room smelled like paper, dust, and the faint tang of coffee someone had. Jacket pressed for once, leaning on his cane like it was part of the ceremony. Then the doors opened, and Harper Kensington walked in. She looked smaller than I remembered, her makeup gone. Lucia spoke first. Her voice was calm, steady, surgical. Your Honor, the Brookstone Hills Homeowners Association is insolvent. Its loan is in default. Its leadership has misappropriated funds and falsified documents. My client, Mr. Garrett Holland, legally purchased the association's common property in a public auction. We are petitioning for formal dissolution. The words hung in the air. Harper's young attorney shuffled papers, clearing his throat. Your Honor, this is unprecedented. My client has served this community faithfully for years. Lucia didn't blink. Faithfully? Perhaps. Legally, no. She handed the clerk a thick stack of exhibits, bank statements, meeting minutes, emails, pages and pages of proof. For a long time, the only sound was the slow turning of paper. Then the judge looked up. Miss Kensington, would you like to respond? Harper rose. Her hands shook as she straightened her jacket. Your Honor, she began, her voice quivering. This man, this outsider, has manipulated everyone. He's turned my neighbors against me. He's stolen our neighborhood. Lucia didn't speak. She didn't need to. The judge frowned. Miss Kensington, please confine your comments to matters of fact. Harper slammed a hand on the table. Facts. The fact is I built that community. I spent 3 years keeping it clean, organized, safe. The judge scanned the top page, her brow tightening. Ms. Kensington, she said slowly, there is a warrant for your arrest for felony embezzlement, fraud, and perjury. The sound that followed. You'll regret this. I didn't move. I just stood there, breathing in the quiet that followed her departure, the quiet of something heavy being lifted at last. When the door closed behind her, dissolution is granted. She paused, looking directly at me. Mr. Holland, your motion for damages will be heard separately. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and the room erupted. Applause. Outside the courthouse, the sun had broken through the clouds. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing like bayonets. Mr. Holland, how does it feel to defeat the HOA? I looked into the nearest. The next day, it was national. Veteran buys HOA, dissolves it from within. The weeks that followed blurred together. Statements, paperwork, meetings. Lucia worked around the clock. The elderly widow, Mrs. Donovan, who had lost her home over fake late fees, got her keys back. When Lucia handed them to her, the old woman just stared at them for a long moment, then started crying. I thought I'd die in a rental, she whispered. You gave me my home back. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, throat tight. Harper's mugshot hit the papers a week later. The headline read, Former HOA president charged in fraud and embezzlement scheme. Underneath it, a photo of the community garden we'd just begun planting. The contrast was poetic. We built that. The air smelled like soil and redemption. By spring, the neighborhood had reinvented itself. We formed the Brookstone Commons Trust, a nonprofit community trust that replaced the HOA. 7 elected board members, 2-year limits, open books, live-streamed meetings. Dues dropped from $385 a month to $45. We voted on everything, from landscaping budgets to paint colors. Though half the time no one cared about colors anymore. People were free. At the first town hall, I stood at the podium in the freshly repainted clubhouse. The smell of new paint mingled with coffee, and the faint sweetness of baked goods someone had brought. The room was packed, standing room only. 3 months ago, I moved here to build a workshop. Instead, we built a community. There was a ripple of laughter, then silence, warm and waiting. I advanced the slides on the projector. HOA budgets from the past, redacted but clear. Under the old board, you paid $385 a month. $18,000 went to Harper's private company. $47,000 went to legal fees, 4 violations. $140,000 vanished entirely. Gasps rolled through the room. The applause began in the back, then spread until it filled the room like thunder. I wasn't finished. We're also launching the Brookstone Opportunity Fund. 2 scholarships a year for neighborhood kids, funded by the damages we won in court. Because if we learned anything from this, it's that no one should lose their future to greed. Parents wiped tears. Reuben slapped my back, hard enough to make me cough. Lucia smiled from the front row. That night, the meeting turned into a block party. Someone rolled out a grill, someone else brought a cooler. Kids ran around with glow. Young couple with a toddler who told reporters they were excited to join a neighborhood without an HOA. You can't script irony better than that. By autumn, life slowed down. The workshop out back was finally finished. The smell of sawdust replaced the old stench of fear. I started teaching weekend metalworking classes, 12 students the first month. We built a pergola for the community. Garden, painted it white, hung wind chimes that sang whenever the breeze picked up. One evening, as the sun set behind the oak tree, Reuben sat next to me on the porch with 2 bottles of beer. The air was warm, buzzing with crickets. "You ever regret it?" he asked. I thought about the months of stress, the sleepless nights, the legal bills, the moments I almost lost hope. The sound was small but perfect. In the months that followed, word spread beyond Tulsa. Other neighborhoods reached out. People wanted to know how we'd done it, how we'd broken the stranglehold of. The state legislature passed a new bill, the Neighborhood Transparency Act, requiring open meetings, capped fines, and proper notice for any boundary change. The local papers started calling it Garrett's Law. I hated that name. It wasn't mine. It belonged to every family that had stood up when it was easier to stay silent. Winter came early that year. The oak tree in my yard shed its last leaves in one silent gust of wind. I stood under it one morning, coffee steaming in my hands, thinking about everything that had happened. How close I'd come to giving up. How a single lie had turned into a movement. A car pulled up. A young couple stepped out, maybe late 20s, nervous smiles. "Are you Mr. Holland?" the woman asked. I nodded. "We just bought a house here," she said. "Our realtor told us about you, about how there's no HOA anymore. We wanted to say thank you." I shook their hands. "Welcome to Brookstone," I said. "You're gonna love it here." They drove off, their laughter trailing down the street. I looked up at the oak tree again. For months during the chaos, it had creaked and moaned in every storm. That morning, it was still, peaceful. Coffee on my own porch. I didn't know I'd end up dismantling an empire of greed or helping write a law. I didn't set out to be anyone's hero. I just refused to be a victim. And maybe that's what all revolutions start with. Not rage, not power, but one quiet no. One refusal to be bullied. Sometimes the smallest boundary line hides the biggest war. Sometimes justice doesn't come in a flash. It comes in paperwork, in patience, in the sound of a gavel hitting wood. And sometimes, when it's all over, justice looks like kids playing under an old oak tree that finally has room to breathe. Weapon. So tell your story. Fight back. Document everything. Because bullies don't fear strength. They fear light. And if you ever find yourself standing barefoot in your driveway at dawn,